We're going to call the April 24th meeting of the Governing Board Study Session to order. Thank you. Our first discussion item is the fiscal year 2024 budget discussion.
Good evening, Chairperson Real, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests. It's my pleasure today to start off the conversation at the study session with hopefully a relatively brief conversation and dialogue related to where we're at with the budget and some of the remaining decisions. So the focus today is going to be really on the operating side, comparing the incremental change, the year-over-year change in revenues and the year-over-year change in expenses, with the focus on some of the remaining decisions and guidance that we're looking for the board to give us some feedback so that we can finalize the board finalize the budget, put it together for a complete review at the May board meeting so that we can take it out to the taxpayers prior to adoption in June. So with that, again, just a quick refresh. Remember, with the budget, what we're trying to do is establish the maximum spending capacity that we can do for the upcoming year. It doesn't require that we spend the entirety of the budget, but what happens is that we want to create a maximum amount of spending so that we have the capacity to spend what we need to spend the money on in the upcoming year. In terms of the current priorities for the budget, again, it is focused on employee compensation, continuing to make progress on the class and compensation study. That is providing another year of experience to our faculty and staff, regular faculty and staff, and then potentially have money available to, one, make some additional adjustments and improvements to the class comp structure, and then two, to provide minimum adjustments for those who won't be getting a year of experience and all. If you have questions, I'll explain that as we get into it. Included in what I'm going to summarize today is sort of a recommendation related to the adjunct faculty rate. And then lastly, and we won't get into this in this part of the study session so much, but the budget, when we bring it to you in May, will both have the capital budget items that we're putting forward for recommendation, and that gets folded into the entire budget in the all funds budget. So that will be coming in May. The latter part of the study session will be giving you an update, giving you sort of a review of where we're at with the currently existing major capital projects, what remains to be done with some of those projects, and then looking forward past this upcoming year, what are some of the decisions and guidance that we're looking for from the board. So that's just a lead into the next session that will be handled later today. So with that, let's get into the nuts and bolts of things. Again, so this is going to be recapping and some of the things that we've already discussed and the board has already given some direction on. But in terms of the projected change in operational revenues, again, what's already been determined is that we have growth in new property, so that's new property that's hitting the tax rolls this year. That amount totals a little bit over $1.8 million. That is, the college doesn't need to do anything to assume that growth in new property, and so we're building that into the budget. The board has already approved a $3 tuition increase that generates a little over $1 million. We're expecting also, and we've discussed this with the board, increases in the Prop 207 revenue coming from the Smart and Safe Arizona marijuana, legalized marijuana money that funnels through to the community colleges, and then investment income. One of the only good news items that's related to interest rate increases is that we get better investment returns. So we're folding in about $1 million of additional revenue from investments. So that subtotal is about $4.5 million roughly of additional revenue. And then the remaining decisions that we have yet to be determined is the board's direction on property tax levy increase. So if the board increases the levy by 2%, that generates an additional $2.6 million, and the board has the ability to go all the way up to a 4% increase, which would be to our levy maximum. That generates another $5.4 million above that 4.5. I've put in here state aid. The state budget hasn't been set yet. There are conversations about potential restoring state aid. I think it's quite unlikely to happen. It would, of course, be super welcome news. I think that the reality is that we will have flat revenues from the state, so we won't add anything, or we won't be able to count on anything additional from the state, or we're certainly not banking on that. Just to give you some context in terms of state aid and some of why there's such a challenge here at the college and why so much reliance is on the decisions between tuition and property taxes, is that back in 2009, when the fiscal crisis happened, the state started reducing the college funding. We used to, at that time, fiscal year 08, we got about $23 million from the state. That is now down to about $2 million now. So the college over time has had to absorb that reduction. Not only is that having to find additional resources to cover for that lack of state aid, but if you think about the 10 plus years that we're talking about since that happened, that's a lot of lost revenue that we would have had to put both into operating and to capital investments. And that's why we have such a big challenge in terms of finding other alternative revenue sources and or finding ways to reduce our expenses. Okay, switching over to the expense side of the ledger. As we've been talking about, what we're building is a budget that year over year just increases very moderate amounts for known contractual obligations, essentially. We do not, for the new board members, we don't inflate the budgets, the operating budgets. We keep them flat. And there are only increases for very justifiable reasons. Typically, that's for contractual obligation increases. So those are typically in the facilities area where we have custodial contracts, and in IT for system license cost increases, those kinds of things. Now, moving on to the employee compensation side, we've talked with the board, and the increase in health costs for our employees we're absorbing. The college is absorbing that total cost. So that's an increased cost of about $900,000. That's both the health care cost and then very small amounts of some of the other insurance and other benefits that are related to increases that we're experiencing this year. The second line down is what the increased cost is for an additional year of experience. So now that we have this market-based pay structure, as everybody gets another year of experience, they move up about, it's around 2.5% for those individuals when they're slotted to move up until they get to the cap points. So what we're looking to do is have those increased costs for all of those people to move up 1 year of experience, and move the cap up. So the cap is currently at step 12 for faculty and the 12-year point, which is the 3/4 point for staff. So the idea is we'll move it up 1 year and just keep going through incrementally for the next few years and sort of gradually phase our way into people being able to move all the way to the maximum in terms of those year of adjustments or year of experience adjustments.
Is it step 12 or step 16 for faculty? And not that it really matters, but just...
I am not 100% sure right now. I think it's step 12 is the cap.
Okay. But it goes up through...
Goes up to 20.
Okay.
To step 20, yes. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the recommended changes or what the faculty are talking about. The cap, I believe, is equivalent, they were trying to keep them equivalent at 12 years of experience, which is why they're both, why it's step 12 and the 3/4 point. A couple of things that we've put into the budget at this point is a 5% increase for the adjunct faculty load rate. And then we are also recommending making adjustments to the tutoring and interpreter wages. So those are both These are temporary employees, so they don't fall into the class comp structure for regular employees that we've talked about. But there are two things happening with the tutors. The minimum wage increases recently have now put pressure onto those more experienced individuals. So the idea is we have a three-tier system for our tutors. The idea is we don't want to have them all get compressed against that minimum wage amount. And so the recommendation, most of that $400,000 is related to increasing the wages for tutors. Interpreters also, we did a market assessment and the hourly rate was a little bit low, so we're recommending increasing the hourly rate. So that's American Sign Language interpreters predominantly. Going back to the increase in adjunct faculty, I know the board had a couple of comments recently about our adjunct faculty rates. I want to sort of clarify where we're at compared to the Arizona Community College peers. The current year, our adjunct faculty load rate is $900 per hour for someone who's brand new to the college. And we introduced last year a two-tier system so that folks who have been here for a certain number of semesters and taught a certain number of classes and have done some professional development are eligible for a tier 2 rate, which is $945. So it's 5% more for that tier 2. How those rates factor versus our peers is the beginning rate is the third highest in the state presently. The tier 2 is the second highest in the state. So the idea that we're not paying competitively is an inaccurate statement. And then going forward, when we're recommending a 5% increase, just to put some context around it, a couple of the colleges are experiencing pretty significant cost of living increases, particularly Coconino and Yavapai, where the housing costs in those areas have skyrocketed versus the wage rates in those areas. So adjunct rates are going up pretty significantly, or the recommended rates are going up pretty significantly. In terms of what the 5% will be, and again, these are not all decided, they're proposed, but it's pretty likely to fall into this category, that our higher rate will be the third highest in the state, behind Maricopa and Coconino, and Coconino is looking to go to be the highest in the state, just some context around that. When you factor in cost of living, we would still be around the second highest because our cost of living is lower than both Maricopa and Coconino, significantly lower than Coconino. So that's where our recommendation is related to adjunct faculty and how that came about, and sort of, again, to make sure that the board and the public is really aware of that our rates for adjunct faculty are competitive. We do pay attention to that, and we do try to make assurance that we're paying a very effective wage rate for those employees. Okay, so the last to be determined, so on the revenue side, to be determined was the property taxes. On the to be determined on the expense side is additional funds that's beyond the year of experience and beyond the recommendations that I'm putting in front of you, to have pool increases that we can make different kinds of adjustments or make additional adjustments for folks. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the ideas, some of the conversations. So, yes.
Before you move on, the line item is $3.2 million, the 1 year of additional experience, move cap plus 1 year. What is the average increase in salary?
So that's about a 2.5% increase for those people.
Okay, and that's not a base increase on the salary schedule?
It is a base increase. So what that means is, so if someone is at, I'll just make up some numbers. So is it $50,000 and they're at like 2 years of experience? Now they've been here another year, they're at 3 years of experience, so they would move up another 2.5%, but that would become their new base salary.
Meaning step 1 would go up 2.5%?
They go to step 2, essentially.
Well, as far as the salary schedule is concerned, what does step 1 change?
It's a range. It is, on average, it's about 2.5%. For faculty, it's 2.25%, which I'll talk about in a little bit. For staff, it's a range, but it's around 2.5% on average.
So a new employee, I'm asking about, compared to a person going from his first to second year, what's the difference? Is it still 2.5%?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so some of the ideas and some of the feedback that we'd like to hear from the board. So we talked about what's built into the budget and built into that structure already is, again, adding a year of experience for people who aren't already making above that, right? So that's one of the key elements, is that if you start and you're at step 1 and you move to step 2, well, if you start and you're currently above step 1, you're not scheduled to get that, or if you're already above step 2, if there's a reason in the past that you're already above that point. And so what we did last year when we implemented the class comp study was to ensure that everybody got some increase. We did the move to 1 year of experience, and then we implemented a minimum increase so that you would get the higher of either the increase to your target point or you would get the minimum increase. And so that one thing that within the structure, if we get a 2% levy, that would provide about enough money for us to give the employees who aren't getting the year of experience would be getting about a minimum. We could do a minimum increase of $1,000. So $1,000 or your minimum 1 year of experience would be the minimum increase that you get. Yes.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to say that I hope I'm not breaking any open meeting law violation, but one of my concerns here is that the administration, when we were given the budgets, there was a pool of money for the administration, but yet we sit here and we negotiate the faculty salary, 2%, whatever it is. And, when I looked at the numbers, I can tell you that some people got an 18% increase in the administration. To me, that doesn't seem fair. My other concern is why did the comparison from the different colleges, you guys took one set of comparisons from one college or, colleges, and then you took another set, a different group for the faculty. So I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just asking about being fair and looking at everybody the same way across the board. So, I really have a problem sitting here talking about, a 2% increase for faculty and staff or whatever that may be, when the same considerations and parameters were given where everybody was not the same.
I think that I'd like to address some things. I think there's some misunderstanding, and I think I can explain what you're talking about. I mean, it's a little bit hard without seeing exactly what you're mentioning, but I think I understand what you're talking about. So there were faculty and staff last year who received increases well over 10%. That wasn't just for administrators. There were, when positions were connected to the market, and depending on how many years of experience people had, they were compared to what their new market rates were for the positions, and then placed for years of experience with their new position and with the new grade for that position. Staff, there were a number of staff positions where the positions were identified as being well below market, and so when they were put into the new structure and they had a lot of experience, they moved up, in some cases more than 18% even. The idea was that was tying these positions to market. There were some administrators who received increases like that. By no means was that because they were administrators. There were many more staff who got those kinds of increases, and faculty received large increases also. That was a function last year of the adjustment to the new class comp structure, and there were big increases, and we talked about that when we did the overview of what happened with the class comp structure and what the overall average increases were. Again, I would disagree with the idea that the administrators were the positions that got the biggest increases on average. That actually is the exact opposite of what happened. A lot of administrators got minimum increases. There were just some administrators, particularly the dean positions, had been well below market for a long time, and they had a lot of experience, so they moved up. So there were the lower level administrators were the ones that got the big percentage increases. It was not the higher paid administrators at all.
I think what Maria is talking about is that originally when we went out and we had those 79 different schools, there were basically 3 groups. There was faculty, and that was split into 2 groups. One group got a $2,000 raise, and the rest got, in your words, significant raises. If you divide the total amount of money that was in each of those pockets by the number of faculty in there, it might have been, I think it was on average, just right around a $7,000 increase. That was for faculty. Then staff and administrators were lumped together, which we're going to hopefully not have them lumped together anymore, because that creates all sorts of just not understanding exactly the numbers. And those people were also separated into 2 groups. Staff and administrators who had a $2,000 raise, and there were, I tried to look on my phone, but for some reason I can't get my numbers up. There were a chunk of people that only got a $2,000 raise, and then the other staff and administrators on average got around a $7,000 raise. Then there was a $0.8 million bit of money that was pulled from those monies going to all full-time employee salary increases, and those monies were just for higher level administrators. And what Maria is talking about is you didn't use the same 79 schools. We went out to different schools because all of those people were already at the max or above the max. So that's what Maria is talking about. And then, so that $0.8 million, if it was split among 30, it wasn't, but if it was, it would be about a $27,000 raise for those 30 people. So those are the monies that Maria is talking about.
Okay, I've heard reference to this $800,000. If the $800 isn't allocated, it is just not used. There's no reason to talk about it. It doesn't become a hypothetical $27,000 raise.
Sure, okay, I agree with that. But Maria is correct. There were quite a few people that got significant raises in the 16 to 19% raise. And I can look up, I have an email with some of them on there. But the fact is that everybody else who got a significant raise was on average of a $7,000 raise in those different groups. If you take the money and you divide by the number of people. That's all she's saying, is that the equity between staff and faculty and administrators wasn't a priority in those salary increases last year.
Not to quibble. I understand what you're saying. Equity is a word that can be used in a couple of different ways. One of them is to tie positions appropriately to the market-based positions, not to positions that aren't comparable. It is also important to understand that the faculty salary, when you're saying the average increase is $7,000, the faculty contract isn't a full year contract also. That is worth remembering. So $7,000 is more equivalent to about $10,000 on the staff side. Just some different ways to think about things as well. But again, the administrators did not get bigger increases than others, other than the ones that I was talking about, the lower level administrators that were what the market results would indicate is that they were below market and had been for some time. We knew that that was a problem, and it was discussed at the very beginning and all through that class comp structure. We knew certain positions had problems where they hadn't been increased over time and that people were hired at step 1 and were all stuck at step 1 for years, and there were a lot of deans that fit into that category. So in terms of the market comparisons, we also did a pretty thorough job doing market comparisons of staff and administrator positions. The separate study that hasn't been done yet, which is related to executive compensation, and that is, I think, worth a conversation with the board at some point, The rest of it is the staff and administrators were done on the same basis of what the comparisons were with national salary databases, which is essentially what the faculty are. Just remember with staff that like, and I always use IT because I think that's the easiest one to understand, IT comparable positions are different from faculty positions in terms of where an IT professional can go. They can go work for a number of different entities, not just higher education entities. So it's important to understand that their market rates are a little bit different and have some different factors related to them. Okay, anyway, so we got back to the minimum increase. So the idea was last year that we wanted to be able to, when we implemented the class comp study, that we wanted to ensure that everyone received a little bit more money, knowing the pressures of inflation that everybody's experiencing. So again, we set up the structure last year where it was your place on the new class comp structure or $2,000, whichever was the higher. And so the question is that this year, is the board supportive of that kind of an approach, and setting up again, I think within the budget and the revenues with a 2% tax levy increase, we would be, I think, have sufficient money to do for those who aren't getting something bigger than $1,000 already, would be able to support a $1,000 increase. Of course, if with a tax levy increase of greater than 2%, that's more money available to do adjustments for salaries. Does that all make sense? Okay, so talking with AERC reps and other individuals related to some of the class comp challenges that we have, there are a handful of things that I still have mentioned. It is hard to make these adjustments without having revenues with which to make these adjustments. It is difficult to make an adjustment that is cost neutral because let me talk through one of the ones that is being proposed. Right now, the faculty structure is set up where it is a 20-step structure. It has six grades, 20 steps. Each step is 2.25%, so that's different from what the staff, again, I said it was an average of around 2.5%, so a year of experience for the staff percentage-wise is a little higher than what a step increase is for faculty. So the faculty group has proposed a new structure that returns a little bit back to where we were. It's not exactly the same as where we were, but it moves back to a 16-step structure, and the step range is closer to the 2.5%, so it's more similar to what the staff is. The challenge with it is that with that new structure, if you hold harmless people, as in if you implement this new structure and you don't just crosswalk people from this old structure to the new structure, some people it results in a decrease in pay for some certain circumstances. That's a challenging thing to do at the college, and so when I say that very few things are cost neutral, it's not that you can't make them cost neutral, they're cost neutral, but they come with a big kickback, which is that there are a lot of unhappy people if you reduce their pay. So that if you hold harmless people, the cost for doing that kind of a change increases pretty significantly. So depending on how we do this, the increase or the change for that faculty step structure ranges from about $500,000 of additional to about $700,000, maybe $800,000 of additional. So it depends on who's retiring, it depends on where people are placed, it depends on a couple of other nuances. And it depends on some other nuances with how people are placed when they first come to the college. So when someone comes to the college with some experience, they can get placed right now all the way up to step 8, depending on their years of experience, and it's a range of years of experience. So depending on how that goes forward and how that is structured, it has a difference in terms of the amount. That's why I'm giving you a range. So that's about $500,000 to $700,000. Faculty supplemental pay rate. So faculty who work outside of their contract are eligible to get, and Chair Real would be familiar with this one, is an hourly rate for doing supplemental work and that rate hasn't changed in a number of years. To increase that by $1, it's not a huge amount of money. I think it's about $30,000 of additional to the college. That is one of the things that's been identified with the group. So we can go back, if we have sufficient resources, we can go back and say, okay, here's some things that are some money that's available that we can make some of these adjustments, which ones are the priorities, so that we can come back to the board. And then there are other issues that we're working on with different groups related to hard-to-fill positions. This is going to be one of the more challenging things to try to resolve at the college. These are positions where, with the new market rates, with what we're going out and putting out when we're recruiting for a job, that we're not able to recruit people into the job. You can't get a solid pool, or you find out that the people who are interested in the job are already making more. So that results in different adjustments to bring those folks in. Sometimes that means the job needs to be elevated in its position. But there are certain other realities that are challenging on the faculty side. For example, there are certain hard-to-fill faculty positions, and how you determine what a hard-to-fill position is and what the premium will be for that is a difficult proposition. And so right now we have one type of position that has a premium, which is nursing. There are a handful of other fields that we think probably have good justification for hard to fill. Again, with resources, I think we can start addressing some of those. It's not a problem with the currently existing nursing faculty, because when they crosswalked over, they carried over the old premium into the new structure, so they essentially are already making a premium. The challenge right now is that with the current structure is recruiting for new people. That's what the challenge is. So these are things that and there are some equivalents to that on the staffing side as well. So again, there is I think a really good need for additional revenues. Again, to both provide some minimum increase to people and then also to be able to make some of these adjustments to the class comp structure to make improvements that we've identified. I want to do a quick and dirty property tax overview and then hopefully open it up for feedback and discussion. This is what the property tax situation looks like. This top line is just what the overall property valuation is in Pima County. That's pretty ignorable. You don't really need to know that. The second line is this is what the college is able to levy, what our current tax levy is for property taxes, so about $130 million, $500,000 and change. Levy neutral, and I mentioned that the growth number, that's an additional $1.8 million. So levy neutral means that for all intents and purposes, you're not increasing the tax rate at all. Because of growth in new property, we get an additional $1.8 million. To go up 2% generates $4.5 million, 3%, $5.8 million, and going all the way to the max is $7.2 million. So this is an additional $2.6 million over the growth number, additional $4 million. Sorry, this thing is so sensitive. And then $5.4 million for that going all the way to the max.
Dr. B?
Yep.
Okay. So I just need a little bit of help here. So you're saying that the net taxable value current year for 23, what is that amount?
That is $10 billion of property valuation. That is
For the entire Pima County?
For Pima County.
Okay. And so the levy neutral, you've got a 3,000, you got an increase there. Where does that come from?
It's last year to
Okay.
this year, yeah.
Okay, that's all I need.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's tell you what it means, I think, in more tangible terms, because again, those are big numbers and it's hard to know what it means. So what this table is showing is more what it means to a normal, typical taxpayer. So if you take a house that in the current year is valued at $150,000, the tax rate currently is 1.2878. So that house, $150,000 of assessed valuation would pay to the college in the year $193. That's what the current year situation is. Levy neutral, again, all things being equal, there are probably 0 properties that don't have some change in assessed valuation, but say, again, all things being equal. Levy neutral means that the taxable value is staying constant for a currently existing house. So say that then the assessed valuation for the typical house went up 3.61% this year. Okay, so that goes up. That house is now assessed at $155,000. The new tax rate at the levy neutral level is going to go down. Like levy neutral, there's increased valuation. We're only assuming for growth in new property. That means the tax rate will go down. So it'll go down to 1.24. So that house, it had an increase in assessed valuation of 3.6%, but they're paying the same amount to the college. Okay, if we do a 2% increase, that's what this scenario says. So the tax rate goes up from the levy neutral of 1.24 to 1.2677. So that property taxpayer would pay now $197. So in the year, they would pay an additional $3.85. And then you can see going forward all the way to the max scenario. So for $155,000 tax valuation, the impact on a typical homeowner would be a relatively moderate $8 for the year.
Dr. B, okay, so this tax is only for the college,
Yes,
nothing else?
correct.
So the city could impose a tax?
Correct.
And the fire district and all that
Yeah.
other, okay.
Yep, that's our share, just our share.
Dr. B,
Yep.
when I was doing this presentation 20 years ago, I was doing $100,000 property taxpayer 20 years ago. What kind of house is that?
This would be a fairly modest house, for sure.
Like one of these houses they're building in the backyard?
I don't think it would be that, but a pretty modest, maybe 2-bedroom territorial. Yeah, it certainly isn't a high income house in Tucson.
I'm not trying to put a nail in my own coffin here, but I'm reading that the average house is selling in Tucson for upwards of almost $400,000. Wouldn't it be a little more honest to raise that to whatever that number would be for a $350,000 home?
We certainly can do that. There are a couple of points that are worth mentioning. One is that it gets a little bit going back and forth. Truth in taxation requires us to use the $100,000. So you will see $100,000 in a month's time. Sorry, it's by law, we mention it by $100,000. I like to show a little bit higher than that because it's more realistic. Also remember that net assessed valuation is not sale price of a house. Your sale price of your house is considerably higher than what your actual assessed valuation is for tax purposes. So this is probably a little more realistic. It might still be low, but it's more realistic than it seems like. And if you just want to inflate it, say, okay, let's go up to $200,000, and now you're at $10 for the year. So it is a linear progression. You can kind of, and I'd be happy in May to show it to you in different valuation levels too. We can put that into the presentation.
I'm just visualizing what my neighbors are going to say in the front patio having a cocktail when I say it's only going to go up $3.
Not for them, right? Not for them. Yes.
Speaking for District 1.
Yes.
Hey, you guys are worth $1 million at least, right?
Okay, so I've mentioned already, so we're going to be putting the whole budget together, putting it in the state required format so that we can talk through the issues. Again, what we're really looking for today is some feedback related to how to proceed with compensation and how to proceed with what the board is willing or interested in seeing in terms of a tax levy increase so that we can put those numbers together and then come back to the board in May with all of that and with the state forms and walk through what the implications and impacts are. And then again, The May decision is really, yes, this looks good, go forward to publish it. What the real thing that matters is the adoption in June. So that's when it really matters what you approve. But again, in order for us to get the public feedback and to get the publications out there, we want to get the board's tentative approval on the budget in May.
So, Dave, in order to do all the things that you just outlined that you wanted to do, what does the tax levy have to be?
Let me go back. I don't think that we can make every change that we would like to make as a college right now. I think the 3% is enough for us to make pretty good headway. It gives a pool that I think we'd be able to go at least a minimum increase of maybe as high as 2,000 and then make some of these other changes. The 4% gives the college, I think, a really good, not only does it does a couple things. One is it gives us the revenues to be able to make those adjustments, but also helps on the deferred maintenance end of the spectrum. It would give us some pools of funds so that we could help on the ongoing obligation side that wouldn't necessarily be going straight to compensation.
So this is a naive question, I'm sure. If we vote for an increase on the levy, we would only, I think, be voting for that if it was a for sure thing that faculty and staff were going to get raises. So I didn't hear that for sure that will happen. I heard a most likely a $2,000 would.
Well, I think I would be interested in hearing what the board's feedback would be on that.
Okay.
That's what we're here for.
I guess what I'm asking is if we vote for a levy and then the college doesn't give our employees a salary increase, is there any way that that could happen?
No.
Okay, thank you.
So how about next time or somewhere in between, you take Mr. Taylor's question and turn it into a tax levy answer? What is it going to take on a tax levy to do everything that you've just talked about?
Okay.
That would be a good number for me to kick
Okay.
around.
We can structure something like that.
And my old business manager used to implore me, don't talk in percentages, Dr. McLean, because you're the only one that doesn't understand that. So it would also be helpful for me.
It's going to be higher than that, actually. Yeah, because that's what we're looking for money. That zero, that blank, the blank at the bottom. But yeah, I think that what we can do is assuming I'm sort of gleaning from the board this. The board is interested in a minimum increase that is greater than 1,000. I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that the board would like to make the increases that are necessary to do the salary schedule adjustment for faculty and implement that, and also to be able to have some funds available for the market adjustment. So that's why I keep hedging, because I don't know exactly what that will be, but the idea would be there would be a pool of funds to be able to address those issues as they come up.
Yeah,
I think the board chair would like to be more specific in that category. Like what's the impact to the employee as opposed to a pool of money that can be used to have an effect on the employee group. Am I wrong? So for me, I'll finish the sentence that I was trying to earlier. It would be helpful for me to hear that this proposal, as it stands right now, would mean 2.5% to employees, or whatever that number is. And in order to do 3.5 and 4.5, the tax levy would have to be such and such and such and such. And then the average employee increase at 2.5, 3.5 would be so many dollars on the average.
I can put
that would
that
help me a
information.
lot.
I can put something like that together. Again, it's going to be a range because, again, with the way that people are paid, some people are paid above market already and are above the point where they'll get just a minimum increase. So there's not going to be a flat percentage increase. There's going to be a very big range. But I can give them to you on average, as a whole. This is what it looks like.
My question is that this only has to do with faculty. It does not have to do with administration, correct?
We're talking about all employees when I'm talking about this.
Okay, I have a question. It's not related to this, but I was looking at the U.S. Department of Education National Center for Educational Statistics, the IPEDS, and I was comparing, and it's a little tricky because, you know, I was comparing two-year public schools, and so IPED says that the average, and once again, I agree, I don't like percentages, but in this case, it's sort of necessary. They spend, the average two-year public school spends 37.1% of its operating budget on instruction. And that is if it's the GASB standards. If it's the FASB, is that how we say it? FASB standards. And in our meeting the other day, it was mentioned that we use some of both, so I'm not sure which one. But anyway, the FASB standard is 30.5% is the average amount spent on instruction, which is faculty salaries. And Pima College is way lower than that. And then on institutional support, which is like executive management, I think that's where executive management is. Those percentages are 19.6 for the GASB and 22%, and Pima College is at 30.3%. So my question, I know we might not be able to fix this possible disparity, but it seems a couple of months ago, Dr. McLean said, you know, it seems that we're doing this backwards. We're raising tuition and we're talking about raising tax levies, but we don't know anything about our actual budget and why we're choosing the numbers we're choosing. And so it might be, we might not be able to do anything about this kind of stuff in the next 2 months between now and June, but it's definitely important as we move forward, and for at least for my term, that I would like to see some of these numbers be closer to what the averages are, since we're really big on averages in this college for some reason.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do benchmarking in terms of some of those categories. I'll just point out a couple of things. So FASB is for-profit or non-government related. So that's one of the reasons why you'd see the numbers are pretty different. So it's either a private institution or a for-profit institution would follow FASB rules. So GASB is the one that would be the more analogous to anything that we would look at. To clarify, institutional support is not executive management. It is the support functions of the college. So that is things like human resources, information technology, finance, certain maintenance, security functions. Administration is in there, but not in an entirety. Academic support has some what we call administration, which I don't want to say that is a bad word, but it sort of is getting that kind of a tone to it. And so there are a couple of important reasons why we will be higher there than a typical organization or a typical other GASB entity. One is that the structure of Arizona community colleges is different from other states. In other states, and Lee can speak to this, information technology, human resources, some of those things are done statewide. We have to manage those things ourselves. That means we have more staff in those areas than you typically would have if it was done statewide, right? If the state was doing the class comp structure or the state was running the information technology system that you are using, those staff would be there and not on your books. And so that's why some of those expenses are a little bit higher. Another reason that they're higher is because the college has put a pretty significant investment in information technology to ensure that we're providing the services and education that are sufficient and appropriate for today's students. And I don't think that you can necessarily say that for all of our peers. So there are things, but I think that would be a great conversation with the board sometime maybe early fall, we can come back and sort of say, okay, this is what we look like in terms of our peers in those different categories, where we're high, where we're low, and some explanations for why we're high and low. It is probably not as bad as what it sounds like, though, just looking at the data, because again, there's some explanations for those. Those are great questions, though, and I think that that's a really good conversation.
So on my end, and it just goes back to, when we had this conversation before, I was talking, excuse me, trying to talk about getting us to where the strategy is driving the budget and the budget isn't driving the strategy. And so that's why I'm asking about, like, what I'm hearing is that we want to do these things that were in that bullet point list. And so it would be helpful for me when we have these conversations, if you say, all right, so like that additional compensation adjustments, like minimum increases, what do I need for that? Like just line item budget for me. So what, I need this much to do this, I need this much to do this, I need this much to do this, I need this much to do this. And then, because it seems like the default when we have these conversations, and maybe it's just, Dave, from past experiences, we were hedging, where I feel like you sort of default to, well, tell me how much money we can have, and then I'll tell you what you can do. Whereas my question is, tell me what you want to do, and we'll try to get you, there. And so, the more I can know about like what is really that total that you need out of that pool, then how do we get to that number, and is that reasonable?
Yeah, and I apologize if that's how it comes across, because I actually think it's exactly I feel like I'm in counseling. I feel like it's exactly what you said. I feel like there's an unlimited demand for things. We want to do this, we want to do that, we would like to have this. And there's limited resources. So oftentimes I'm in the position of saying, well, here's the resources you have available. You're already having to kind of make decisions up front that it's unrealistic to do with some of the realities we have from a resource standpoint.
That makes sense. And that's helpful. And I think from my standpoint, it's just, I mean, I can only speak to me as an individual, but if you bring to me, we know there's a million things we could do. These are the 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is we really think we need to do to be competitive, to get the best faculty and staff and everybody else that we need to do. This is how much it's going to cost. Can we figure out a way to get there? That's great conversation.
Well, let me just add, because all of you, for the most part, you're coming in on midstream to the strategies that we have put in place as a college. I'll give you 2 examples. So when we did the DevEd redesign, we said this is what we want to do as a college. Dave had to figure out how to allocate the resources to achieve that strategy, to implement that. We also did that on the workforce side. So a lot of the things you're seeing at the college today did not exist when I first arrived here. So the strategy's been driving a lot. Now we've come to a point where to be competitive, or continue to be competitive, that's why a lot of the focus are on the salary and compensation issue. But I will say this about compensation. There are places you can go work where the employees have to pay for the health care benefits. So you'll see employers giving pay increases, but the employees are responsible for paying for the health care. We have been very successful in not doing that to date. I don't know how long we can continue to take that approach.
Just a preview of the question I'm going to have when you come back is that amount of money that increases every year needs to be a line item with the other salary increases. So we see the total cost of taking an employee from year 1 to year 2.
That's good.
And essentially that's in total. That's what this 3.2 million is. So that is, everybody gets another year of experience, essentially costs us $3.2 million. So it's a pretty big commitment on an annual basis, particularly when you're talking about tuition increases of $3 generate $1 million and growth generates $2 million. You just used up your money right there, giving people another year of experience. But what you're saying is, I shouldn't say give. The idea is recognizing the extra value that the other additional year of experience is providing to the college. It's recognizing that value.
So I just have 4 quick questions, and then you don't necessarily have to answer them right now. Next time would be fine.
I'll reserve the right.
Thank you. when would these salary changes go into effect? I just would like to understand that sort of thing. And then I'm assuming that a cap means that you're capped at that salary. So my question is, why are we capping at step 12 or step 16 if we have 20 steps? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then my last question, I'm going to combine it. When you say that our adjunct faculty tier 1 is the 3rd highest, that is fine, but being 3rd highest is a lot different than $1 more than the 4th payer. Do you see what I'm saying? So like if Coconino pays $1,400, and I'm just making these numbers up, Coconino pays $1,000 for adjunct faculty per load, and we're the 3rd payer, so we pay $900. But if the 4th payer is paying $899, it seems disingenuous to say that we're, I know we are 3rd payer because I can do the counting, right? But if we're just $1 above the 4th payer, I don't like someone to tell me that we're 3rd payer because, we should say we're almost tied with 4th.
Right, and I tend to be very realistic and accurate when I say things like that. We're closer to 2nd and 1st than the others.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I would be happy to show that in a chart too, so that you can see where it's at, which I have done in the past. Again, it's to give a context, so what the rates look like, they'll be low is 806 per load hour. We are, let's see, high will be 1,056. Again, these are proposed, so they're not for sure. So there's a fairly significant range. Our tier 2 will be 992 with that 5% increase. So again, much closer to the top, and particularly when you do a cost of living adjustment, those 2 tops are higher cost of living locations than here. But I will put a chart together so you can see that. And I guess you asked a couple other questions. We're talking about July 1st for pay changes, and I can answer all 3 of them. I just forgot what the cap doesn't mean you're stuck at that rate because we've done the minimum increases. So what it means is that you're not going to you would be compared against step 12 or the 3/4 point, and if you're above that, you would get a minimum increase, not you're at that level. So there are lots of people who are above that level. They're just not getting the 2.5% annual increase. So they're scheduled to get a lower increase because they're already above that point. That's what a cap means. It doesn't mean that everybody's making that same amount. I think I need to show that. I will show it at a future point so you can see what I'm talking about. I know that I didn't describe that well.
So we had an HR committee meeting today, which I assume is an advisory committee.
Yes.
And I'd like everybody to know we couldn't take any action on anything because we didn't have a quorum. And I don't know what kind of message that sends, but we do have some vacancies on the committee that need to be filled.
Luis, how long has that been going on?
Several months, I guess. It's hard to do. I guess it's a little bit difficult in reference to trying to recruit, but I think that's the process is going on, correct? Mm-hmm. Do the outreach for, to have the committee, to fulfill the committee that we need to. Because the last time, it's been about 3 meetings now, going on 3 meetings, we haven't met quorum.
So who's responsible for that?
Okay.
You can't have this.
We'll come back to that at another point, but it's, because we have a lot to cover today, but we'll take care of that too. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. We will follow up with the different things we've talked about and have a good conversation in May. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, Dave B. Dr. B. Could you separate out on an expense item, the administration raises?
Administration is typically shown as a separate line item in the budget. I'd be happy to show that. Getting back to it actually, when looking at the iPads and the information that Chairperson Real mentioned, our management and or our administrative line is not out of line with the size of the institution. And we'll provide some information related to that. Yes.
Once the budget is posted, so we have a common timeline reference to the community to address this well too, correct?
Sorry, the cough got me.
Once the budget is posted, as it has been before.
Yes.
But there's a time for the community to also come in on it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way, again, great question. Following up on the process. So May we'll have a discussion about what the whole budget looks like. With that, then the board says, okay, this looks good. Go ahead and post it, publish it, let the public know, because at the June board meeting, before that June board meeting happens, is a public hearing for the purpose of adopting the budget. And that's when you go through, if you do a truth and taxation adjustment, that's when you do that and you do the formal adoption of the budget, and the public has an opportunity to comment then.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all.
Okay, our next item on the agenda is the downtown campus hotels and the East Campus.
Good evening, Chair Real, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, friends and guests of Pima. So tonight what we're going to do is basically give you the good, bad, the ugly, as Chair Real expressed to me the other day about wanting to kind of understand everything when it comes to the hotel properties. We've got a kind of emerging issue that we'll talk about with PSESI and 29th Street, and then also really kind of talk about the kind of where we're going to go with, with PSESI. But before that, we'll talk about really, you've asked also about the facilities and educational master plan. So we'll do a little bit of background on that. We'll also talk about capital projects and expenditures, kind of, all the items that you were kind of, in essence, just talking about, where we want to go as a college and how much this is going to cost. And then a minor, not minor, it's a fairly large thing, is our deferred maintenance. So that's kind of the agenda. And what's going to happen here is I'll kind of lead off the discussion, and then I'll have facilities with Brandy Delana come up and talk about the hotel properties. And then once that's done, we'll go into the expenditures, like I said, and then she'll probably still be up there with actually Benny Sanchez, who will talk. He's the director of facilities, so he'll talk a little bit more in depth about that because of the expenditures. And then Amanda Abens will come up with talk about PSCSI, supported by Ian. Okay. So kind of the bottom line up front is we're going to really kind of look at two things, like I said, ongoing escalation costs. The $10 million that the previous board allocated towards hotel properties is not enough, so we're going to seek some guidance from you on that. And then, of course, PSCSI, again, the emergent issue is the HVAC system's failing on 29th Street. It's a leased facility from TOSD. They are not going to fix it. So it's up to us to do that, and then it's just what approach you want to take. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. Okay, and then acceleration of PSESI. And by the way, when we talk about acceleration, Dolores will come up, Dr. Duran-Sordo will come up and talk about how she envisions like reimagining the campus. Okay, Brandy, over to you.
Can you hear me? Is this on? Maybe. It's good? Great. Okay, so we're going to start by looking back at the college's last planning efforts, which began in 2014. And we entered that process soon after the state reduced the budget by that great deal from $23 million to $2 million that David B. was talking about. So of course, the funding loss required consideration as we were planning. At that time, the college determined a need to perform an in-depth study of alternatives for moving forward. And a quick review of the list in this slide shares various components of that effort, with the outcomes being both the educational master plan and the 2015-2025 facilities master plan. So these plans served as guideposts for the college's decision-making around project planning. We've provided you with a link to those planning documents in the executive summary that we sent to you as part of this presentation. And there's some pretty good bites of information in those documents. So we've provided them for your review now, but also maybe star those and keep them. They're really great references as you're moving forward making decisions. So next slide. Do I do that? Can you do? Thank you so much. So as various recommendations formed, the college considered a number of approaches. They considered a distributed approach, and that's the approach where similar programs would be distributed across all of the campuses. And the focused approach, where different campuses would provide programs that program was exclusive to that campus. So the college held community forums and listened to industry needs and came away with plans for the Center of Excellence and the career pathways. That's the direction that we're taking now. The plans were vetted extensively, including recommendations by the executive leadership team and board involvement in study sessions prior to the board arriving at their final decisions for moving forward. So the college ordered projects, and now I'm on that second bullet, Centers of Excellence, and I'm talking about the order of projects there. They ordered the projects with the objectives of influencing this question: where can we grow enrollment? And at the Center of Excellence bullet, the second one, we've listed the order of precedence as it relates to what we believe would be enrollment growth. After listening to industry leaders state that there was a gap in the labor force, cybersecurity was identified as a first priority program. This cybersecurity program now in place is designed for direct employment, or it may also apply to an advanced degree. Most of the Centers of Excellence names speak clearly of their components. However, we felt that it was worth mentioning that the second one listed, the Applied Technology, includes the new transportation building, the new aviation building, and the new advanced manufacturing building. Next slide. So the meat and potatoes. Now we're going to get into these next two slides, which demonstrate existing and future project budgets and funding considerations. Let's take a minute to orient ourselves. On the left-hand side of this slide, you're going to see projects that have been completed or that are prioritized. Projects with black font are complete, and so they will have no information in the additional funding needed column. Red fonts show progress on projects that are in progress, and blue font shows projects that have not yet started. And then we go over to the right columns, and they demonstrate the budget and the funding for all of these projects. These include funding sources that have been identified or are anticipated, and in that last column, you'll see those kinds of funding sources, and the legend is at the bottom of this document. And then projects that have a single asterisk after the name indicate that planning's underway, and the final budget's not yet established. So for instance, over at the downtown campus, ST, East and West renovation, you see that asterisk there. So there's different ideas for how that project might move forward. And when we were evaluating the budget on that, we took kind of a middle-of-the-road approach. It wasn't the Taj Mahal, and it wasn't the very minimum approach. So that 33.7 there represents a middle-of-the-road approach. And the first slide, this is all the Center of Excellence projects. Then we move to the next slide. And this slide are remaining projects to consider. It lists project priorities that support Center of Excellence endeavors. For instance, under West Campus, you see Building F and Building K there. And those are projects that support Center of Excellence. And then there's other projects on the list that are currently identified as priority projects. When we add the additional funding needed column, without including duplicate numbers for the same project, for instance, look at that downtown properties, there's a 1, 2, 3, and 4 option there. So under the additional funding needed, you see that there's one project that would be 25.7 million additional funding, and the downtown properties 3 project is 7.3 million additional. We only took one of those numbers when we totaled those columns, the 25.7. Same thing with the 29th Street Coalition Center, where there are 2 approaches. We took the one number, the 1.3 versus the 6.4. So we added all the additional funding needed column. It came up with the 193.4 million that you see there. And then that 193.4 is distributed across the columns to the right. So we show the amount that's proposed for funding in fiscal year 24. We show the amount that's proposed for funding in fiscal year 25. You'll notice a jump there. And then all the years that succeed the fiscal year 25 is the future funding. That could be distributed over a number of years or 1 year, depending on the board's decisions around it. But this starts to give you an idea of, what are we dealing with when we talk about all of the desires that are out there. One other thing we need to consider, and that's the next slide, we're going to move into a different project budgeting consideration.
Can I pause you for a second? For
Oh,
a question on
absolutely.
this side? Sorry, I can't actually look at you because I can't speak in the microphone. Sorry, it's weird.
You're fine.
Where would, and maybe it's under grant, but where would, if there were a private business, for example, that was contributing through the foundation that helped to develop one of these things, where would that be reflected in the different categories that you have there for funding sources?
That's not identified. A foundation supplement to the budget is not shown here, but it certainly could be considered. And grants, when I put that in there, I was thinking more about federally funded increases, that kind of thing, or special programs that we apply for grant money on. So it's a good catch. There's nothing in there that shows donations from foundation at this time.
So does that mean that we don't have any at this time going towards any of these projects, or just that it's not shown on this table?
I'm looking at, correct, we do not have any at this time.
Substantive amount that's showing up. You can repeat that.
Oh, it's not at a substantive amount, so we're not having that shown.
Okay, thanks.
But certainly, if you know someone who would like to donate a lot of money to the college, we're open to that.
So, I'm sorry, so the
Maureen.
question is, what you're showing us is the numbers, the amount of money that is needed to complete these projects, correct?
Correct.
And that's coming from the college?
It hasn't yet been determined where it will come from. The future funding sources that are identified are those types of funding sources that we have used historically on these kinds of projects. So let's take, for example, let's go to Building F Sciences Labs, because that's one that's under construction right now. So that one was funded with college reserves, and it was also funded with revenue bonds. Does that help? Yes. Okay, great. Any more questions before we move off this slide? Not that you can't ask questions later, but, okay.
And if I can add, if I remember right, most of the money from the foundation actually goes into programs versus buildings, right? So like the Thomas R. Brown Foundation, when they gave us that kind of money is going actually into a program, which is way different than providing resources for a building.
Okay, next slide. So this is deferred maintenance, and it's a different project budget consideration. Worthy of mention here, maintenance needs often exceed the allowable budget and therefore are deferred, hence the term deferred maintenance. These deferred needs can be addressed different ways. For example, they could be addressed as a standalone project. Think about a roof that might need to be repaired, one roof, and we fix it. Then there's as a college-wide system repair, that would be a number of roofs over maybe a number of campuses. We put it all into one project, we put it out to bid, and a contractor comes in and cleans up all our roofs in one fell swoop. Or as part of a renovation consideration. Over here at Building F, for example, that building was in dire need of repair, and so when it was selected as a building that was a priority, it both addressed the deferred maintenance of that needs of that building, as well as the fact that it supported the Center of Excellence projects. So we got a twofer on that one. So this slide does a really good job of representing our facility conditions. The highest need is seen at the HVAC bar graph. That's the tallest bar right in the middle at the $50.6 million. And you'll notice that $10 million of that is being identified as critical. This need is demonstrated as time and again we experience HVAC failures across our campuses. I'm sure you've heard about those. I thought now might be a good time to share that the energy savings project currently underway, this project is installing controls that will not only help manage energy usage, but will also help identify when systems are not functioning properly. It does not improve the HVAC conditions. That's separate work that needs to happen, but it will help us understand it more specifically. One way we address funding for deferred maintenance is through assigning money specifically for deferred maintenance. And another way we might address funding occurs when we renovate the spaces I mentioned before and capture those costs as an amalgamated cost. And I already talked about the Building F. So there you have it. It's a brief overview of project types, funding needs, and funding considerations, and it's a lot of information. But I thought at this introduction, we just take it really 30,000 feet and delve into it as we move forward together.
Okay, I have a question, sorry.
Of course, no problem.
Okay, so what you've identified here is the total needs. It includes deferred maintenance and anything new that's going to be coming on board. Am I correct in saying that?
Are you looking specifically at the bar chart here?
The bar charts. Okay, so for example, let's take the HAVC. It's got 50.6 million, whatever that is. So
That's right.
what does that include? So you've got four or five different sections there.
Yes.
So the red is needs immediate?
Yes,
Okay, and that's deferred maintenance.
as are the remainder of those items.
Okay. And then the yellow part, the orangey part is what?
That could go out as long as 2 years. It's not been identified as the part of a system that will fail immediately, but that it is of concern. And then as we move up that slide and we get into the green, we're talking about we should probably do some repairs on that part of the equipment within 10 years. So it's a range from 0 years to 10 years.
Okay, and the yellow, please?
Oh, sure. That's due within 5 years of inspection. So they're recommending, the person who performed this survey said this stuff, say the motor on this particular part of equipment would require replacement based on its warranty within 5 years. Or the chiller that you have over here has a 25-year lifespan and it's at its 20th year. So within 5 years, you're going to want to replace that.
Okay, so now, I hope I'm not out of line here, but I'm going to tell you. So does this amount of the HAVC system include the train system, or is that all separate?
It's all separate.
Okay.
What train, you're not out of line at all.
Well, just the new system, the new controllers that you're talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So those controllers go in there, and they're like the brains of what's happening in the HVAC, and they send feelers out and talk to the equipment, and the equipment says, oh, I'm not functioning up to par. I'm not doing what I should be doing. And then the operator on the computer can see that there's a problem there, and then we can target our improvements to a much greater degree than we could before we had those controllers.
Okay, so let me ask another question. So considering that we are using the train controllers for the new for the new buildings or whatever,
Yes.
I thought originally we were still using advanced ceramics, but perhaps not. But any maintenance on any of the new buildings will have to come from train, correct?
No. No, their program was specific to provide us with controllers, to provide us with opportunities to improve our energy usage for energy savings. So that contract is about controllers and lights primarily. And as those controllers start reading things, we'll become more aware of what's needed, what we have to do to improve.
Okay, so that means that the Delta systems that were used in the older buildings, those would remain?
Yes, what's really interesting about Train is the Delta systems that are on the building. Train can sit on top of those Delta systems and take the information that Delta has and transfer it into our computers so that our operators, before Train, we had 3 different systems. One of them is obsolete, basically, hard to improve or make changes to any longer. The other one's kind of in the mid-range, and Delta's a pretty good system, not bad, but what we're doing with Train is we're providing a uniform system with a uniform report so that we have a more comprehensive understanding of all of our campuses. So it's in one snapshot.
Okay, and then this is my last
Oh, no,
question.
you're good.
So you're integrating the Delta systems into the train controllers, correct, to get the readings that you need? And then who's paying for that?
So we're paying to have Train put the controllers in place and read the Delta systems. So the college is paying for that.
Okay, wait, maybe I didn't ask it the right way. The Delta systems, Train doesn't know how to use the Delta systems, correct? So that means that the people from Delta, that have the Delta systems, have to come in and work on them to be able to interact with the Train systems. Is that not right?
We will still have involvement with Delta, absolutely, yes.
But there's a common language, I think is what I think you're trying to say. There's a backbone industry standard, no matter what controller is out there, that theoretically talks to each other, right? There's proprietary systems, there's other systems that are common to an industry. And so that, if I'm not mistaken, Benny, that's what's being generated, and those signals, like before, nothing was remoted. And buildings were either on or they're off, and there was no adjusting and looking at a building and saying, what? Well, you're running at 74 degrees, you should be running at 68 degrees, and then bringing it down automatically. None of that ever happened. With the Train controllers and the system that we're integrating, all that will happen, and that's why they can guarantee $863,000 a year savings.
Wasn't it 200 and something?
Oh, no, it was $863,000.
My number, sorry. Okay, let's go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to, from here, we're going to be moving forward into, I believe, the hotel properties presentation. So Benny will come up and present.
Okay, and let me add in, as Benny's coming up here, we wanted to ensure that you kind of understood the numbers and where we're at from a financial probably need. And so you can, as a board, look at this in more of a prioritization, as well as for kind of really setting the ground for a further discussion on either geo bond, revenue bond. So again, you have that in the back of your mind as we go through some of this material now, okay? Go ahead, Benny.
Good afternoon, Chair Rial and board members. So, as Tom mentioned earlier, I'm going to give a brief presentation on the hotel properties and also give a little bit of context on how we got here on this first slide. So, the initial steps began around 2017 through 2019 in securing the properties and finalizing escrow. And during that time, that also allowed dates to be established for the college to do their due diligence. The 3 properties in question here on the slide are the Frontier Inn, the Copper Cactus, and the Tucson Inn. The vision of that was consolidating efforts, services provided by the college for critical career technical education and general education offerings. While these spaces do provide the opportunity to co-locate, one of the key elements to consider as we go through this through these slides is the development cost impact of moving forward with the properties. Another element of consideration is the location of the properties and their proximity as being in the Thrive in the 05. The Thrive in the 05, for members that are not familiar, it's a community-based group that really focuses on neighborhood identity and rebranding commercial portions of their properties within the 05. In addition to the Thrive in the 05, the downtown campus does have a history of readaptive use. The example is our RV building. It's a historical building, and there's been obviously effort and dedication made to preserve it. Now, as all these efforts have gone through their appropriate steps, there were multiple assessments that were completed, ranging from evaluation of the mechanical systems, electrical systems, historical reviews, and most recently completed was a feasibility study to look at the space use parameters for the project.
And that was at GLHN?
Correct. That was architectural from GLHN. So what we're going to look at here is our option one. And this option is maintaining the guidance provided by the board dated May of 2022. So this idea was to preserve the Tucson Inn, and we'll call it the front half, which is where the diner's located. Every one of those reports that I mentioned earlier all identified the realization that the back half of the Tucson Inn, which is the two-story room part of it, to be demolished because of the dilapidation and condition of that particular structure. Now, with the repurposing of the Tucson Inn, it also included the Cactus as a whole, so the Cactus Inn and the Frontier Inn as a whole. And there's been a constant of maintaining the signage that is located right off of Drackman for each one of the properties. This was a total building square footprint of just under 27,000 square feet. This cost estimate that we're looking at is at $35.7 million. And through each one of our slides as we go through this discussion, there's going to be some pros and cons, and we'll go through them. So this particular option, which is maintaining the current guidance, keeps the integrity and charms of the hotels. But there is some additional work that will be done just to be able to provide the appropriate use and space to repurpose and readaptively use those hotel spaces. It opens up the downtown campus to these properties, which through additional efforts to ensure that we have ADA connectivity, we have a circular path integration between these properties and our existing downtown campus. Cons, they're hotels. They're really not indicative to our learning environment. Their design and classification is for residential use, not a business use. And as we go through these development processes, they do require a level of review by the City of Tucson for historical stakeholders. So this, again, this is option one. This keeps us in line with the original guidance provided by the board last year in May. Oh, wrong way. Here's our, yes.
Okay, so 35.7 million. That's not the total, that won't be the total cost. That'll end up being more, won't it, since you have to, since historical buildings take a different set of requirements to keep them the way that they are, or, you know, basically the outside of it. So do you know what that cost really is?
So this 35.7 million is what we've looked at and ran as a total project cost. So this gets us through site improvements, construction of the buildings, and also includes furniture, IT improvements, things in essence to be able to turn over turnkey to our end users.
So if you looked in, if you did in the read ahead material, there's an example of what a spreadsheet is in the programmatic aspect of figuring out what these costs are. And so it shows you line by line exactly, what's being looked at, anything from IT, as Benny said, to, and in this case, all the hotel properties have it, and Benny will get into it probably, there's a 25% increase just alone in the utilities that have to be redone because these are older. So that's bringing the price up a bit more than normal, et cetera, et cetera. But we have for every project on here that's listed on actually that cost sheet, we have detailed cost analysis that we didn't put it in the packet just because we didn't think that you wanted that. But if you do, we can get that to you. But it takes in all the hard costs, soft costs, all the escalation costs, and we'll get into escalation in a minute. But it's about double to a little bit more than double cost from an escalation standpoint from pre-COVID to now.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
No, fair. No, not a problem. So our second option is looking at the preserving the diner, the front half of the Tucson Inn, and one of the key components, and I glossed over it, but I'll go back in a minute, is to preserve that front diner because it allows the most opportunity for clear open space to land our innovation services there. So it allows for appropriate development of space that they would utilize to provide that service. And I'm gonna go back to slide 1 just because I glossed over it. So there's been a great effort extended since May of 22, and part of that has been some programming, efforts being completed to meet with potential end users that might be able to fulfill these spaces here. And it's been an extensive process of interviews with faculty affairs, for example, innovation, student affairs, and the group that fit most, that was aligned with a collaborative effort was our Innovation Center, Faculty Affairs, DE&I, and our Ed Tech services. And I'll continue down to option 2. I wanted to make reference to that just because I'd gone through that part and failed to mention it. So this option 2 is a building square footprint of 4,500 square feet, which is that front part of the Tucson Inn. Like I said, it's called the diner. And then we're looking at parking lot improvement services with the remaining spaces where the Frontier and the Copper Cactus were located. Again, every one of the options that you're going to see shows that we maintain the signage along Drachman. We'll go through a couple of the pros. It helps maintain some of the historical integrity. The funding stands within the dollar amount that Tom had referenced at the beginning of the presentation, that $10 million. Cons, we will have to go through a deregistration process with the city and the historical stakeholders to go through this. There is some, as Tom mentioned, infrastructure costs that are going to be taken into account because part of that is they're non-existent or we're not able to reuse them, so we have to replace them and install new. Our option 3, again, continues with the guidance of our end users. Our cost we're looking at this one is $17.3 million, and this gets us a 10,500 square foot facility with appropriate parking for this facility and the addition of our advanced manufacturing and transportation facilities at our downtown campus. This particular option helps, again, keep some of the historical integrity. Again, we have that innovation hub right there at our diner, and also creates the space for our D&I teaching and learning center and our ed tech services. We will go through the deregistration process, not the optimal use for educational purposes, and again, infrastructure costs. A con for this one too is we'll have to ask for additional fundings to be able to capture what is needed for this particular option. Option 4 is a parking lot development. We go through at a cost of $3.6 million. We're going to be demolishing just under 58,000 square feet of buildings, and again, constructing a parking lot. This, again, will still maintain the signage for the Tucson Inn, the Copper Cactus, and the Frontier. Pros, it provides additional parking for our downtown. It gives us space potential for expansion at downtown when funding is available. Cons, we're going to be visiting and going through the process of, reaching out to our stakeholders, additional effort to go through that. There's the deregistration process where we're landing with the city of Tucson and going through that process as well. So as we consider those 4 options these are some of the ramifications. So the hotel properties themselves are within the Miracle Mile Historic District, and they are considered contributors to the district, to the Miracle Mile Historical District. The district itself, just for some context, so you guys don't want to read through that whole lengthy slide there, is that there's 102 individual properties with 279 individual resources, building sites, things like that. Potential political and community concerns. It could be a small segment, could be a big segment, but it's an important item to have out there. And there is a number of government stakeholding communities that we would have to visit through going through some of these options. And again, what I want to make clear is even as we're considering development, we're also going to visit these groups too, just as here's how we're moving through, because development at the current guidance that the board has given requires that just to be able to meet and develop and build buildings that are within code requirements, that we're looking at, expanding them where we may be able to preserve some of the buildings, but a lot of them, there's going to be extensive reconstruction effort to go through with that. So I know that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
I have a question regarding those stakeholders that you talked about. So, we all received some letters from Councilmember Dahl and the Tucson Pima Historic Commission, I think maybe the Neighborhood Association. There was a couple in there, and I've been, going back and forth by email with some of them, and they at least all seem to have the understanding that the college, and I'm not sure if by the college it means the board or some other representative of the college, promised certain things, and that a lot of what has been done in terms of the county and the city's economic development plans, grants that have been applied for, the plans around Thrive in the 05, all of that built into those plans or sort of assumed within those applications for grants and things is that we were going to do this adaptive reuse at this site. So I'm curious to hear from you, or maybe this is more for Chancellor Lambert or Tom, whoever, like what did the college promise while we were acquiring these properties in terms of what we were going to deliver? Because I mean, I'm learning a lot here, which is great, but I also am cognizant of, I don't want us to, from I don't know, reputation, if nothing else, feel like that we went back on something that we promised all these groups that we were going to do.
No, it's a great question. So the board, current and past, had made a commitment to adaptively reuse these properties. And so those users as you've identified, have moved forward with their components based on that decision point. I think things to weigh out in addition to these is what you just hit on. The college, board included, made a promise to the community to adaptively reuse the properties. The board, today's board, if the decision is otherwise, needs to weigh that into the mix. Also, just keep in mind, it probably would call into question the integrity of the college, that we made a prior commitment and now we're going to change that commitment. So I would say, if you change the commitment, we need to be able to explain very clearly the reasons why the change. And I would say to all of you, before you make that change, whatever it's next month, 3 months down the road, that we have a conversation with the community, hear all of the different concerns and perspectives before making that change, to demonstrate that this board is committed to the integrity of what the college has done to date.
I have a,
Sorry, can I just do one follow-up? I just want to make sure, so that commitment that was made, or at least the perception of that, is option one. I just want to be clear that I understand that correctly.
Option 4. Option 1 to keep them as is, option 4 to...
No, I mean, like, whatever, like, the commitment that was made to the community previously is manifested in option 1 on this list. Is that, my understanding correct?
That is correct, and here's the nuance. When the board, it was not unanimous, I will say that. One nuance to this was the hotel portion of the Tucson Inn, and that we would look at the feasibility of whether we could preserve that. This is coming back and essentially saying we cannot feasibly keep that portion of the property. So this is in keeping with the decisions that were made prior. But the important thing about this is the cost has increased since that time. That's why the number has gone up.
okay, so if you would please give me some time. So I have a letter here from Michael Gross, and it says, and this was dated June the 7th, and it says, I am watching the recorded feed on the June 7th, 2021 study session. Please see the attached regarding the hotel motel properties that were recently purchased. Tucson Realty and Trust Company, to whom it may concern. Over the past several years, I have bought numerous properties to Pima Community College for the purpose of expanding their downtown campus. Recently, the properties were older motels and vacant land. Let me make it perfectly clear that prior research by me for these purchases by Pima Community College were based upon the value to redevelop these properties as parking lots or buildings similar to the new automotive center just completed, maybe as classroom or administrative buildings. These properties were never purchased to remodel or be renovated as motel or hotels. This was also disclosed to the prior owners of these properties as an appraiser who came up with the value we used to purchase some of these properties. And then he says, if you have any questions, give him a call. Now, the other portion that I want to talk about is bond money was used to purchase these properties. The bond money, and Chancellor, I asked you specifically to provide information. What did you tell Pima Community members, the constituents, in order, maybe you weren't here, to purchase the buildings to initiate and get that approved, that bond money approved? The bond money was used to purchase the properties, and it was for parking lots. Okay, now every other thing came in, but that was after the fact. Now, and I have something that I wanted to state. Okay, first of all, I want everyone to know that I am fully supportive of cultural history, keeping the old, appreciating the old ways, that things happened. But on this discussion, several years ago, the instigation of former board members of the college purchased the hotel properties under discussion. Our mission is, quote, empower every learner every day for every goal, unquote. Pima College provides educational services to residents of Pima County. As a board member, my responsibility is to assure that PCC fulfills its primary mission, The unanswered question is, how will the costly renovation of these properties improve our basic student success indicators? Given our mission statement, the current state of enrollment, underutilized space, budget shortfalls, the renovations of these hotels should not be a priority for PCC. In accordance to the Attorney General, the college enrollment of 19,500 students in 2013, and in 2022, our enrollment is 11,462, a loss of 41% during this time. Presently, the college has surplus and underutilized instructional and student support space that could easily be converted to student faculty use. To date, as a member of the board, I have yet to receive quantifiable financial evidence that accurately projects the total cost of renovating these properties, or to justify with evidence the expenditure of college funds on this renovation. The responsibility to renovate this property is not within our scope of our mission. If the preservation of these properties is such an important goal, certainly there are organizations better suited to undertake it. Until I am provided with accurate independent cost analysis, I cannot support any further action on these properties. Now, we have, I believe, a 35% utilization of all our 5 campuses. We have to maintain them. We have to pay electricity. We have to have deferred maintenance. All this stuff. Why would we be doing this now? We can better serve our community. Even in building a brand new building would be better suited. If you looked at the properties, you would see, you know what, I think they're wonderful. Honestly, I've been through them. I think if they want to move them so that they don't get destroyed, wonderful. Come up with the funds, help us, help locate them somewhere. That's all I have to say. I can't support this. And I think that we should all take a really good look at that. If the city wants them, then let the city do something with them.
So I have a follow-up question to build on what Maria said around the finances. So you said there was $10 million approved. Has that been spent already, or were we like 10 million in on these, or what is the?
No, it hasn't been spent. We spent about 100K on the architectural.
Just over 100,000 has been spent to date.
And one of the things that I'll just kind of go back up to the ramification slide, the last 2 bullets. So just again, so we all understand where we're at. There's no contractual obligations if you choose not to continue on or to continue on. I mean, there's no, you got to spend $8 million now because we've signed up for something that's not there. I just want to make sure that you understand that in your calculus. And then per federal law, you don't have to go through the deregistration process. And this was confirmed by GLHN. So if you don't, then there's going to be, again, potential more backlash, right? But you as a board can choose not to. Again, getting back to the point of engaging the community and having a conversation with them on why you made whatever decision you're going to make, right? So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody because I think regardless, you're going to have to do that, whatever you decide. Again, we want to be open, transparent, and again, this is your decision, but I just want to make sure you had all the information that's available.
Can you explain to me, explain the 10 million? I don't.
That's what was allocated to you from the board to renovate the properties pre-COVID when we made the decision, or right prior to the.
It wasn't a bond.
It was Cartilage Reserves, I think. Is that right there? Yeah.
Reserves.
Not the purchase. It's the $10 million to renovate. Back then, because of, again, cost escalation has gone up so much, it's now 35 and change or whatever it is.
What I'm saying is the bond money was used to purchase these properties.
Yes. We purchased a lot of things with the bond money.
So let me, let's back up. And if you want a whole presentation on this, we can do that. But I want to just say this. Draw the distinction between the revenue bond and the GO bond. Revenue bonds do not come with the same restrictions that a GO bond process would require. So the college had more flexibility in how it would use those funds, as long as we were using them tied to things related to capital. So I just want you to know that the college did not go out of bounds in how it utilized those funds. We combined revenue bonds with our own college reserve dollars, along with some investment from the state to do our existing properties. So I just wanted to clarify that for Board Member Garcia, because I think there may be some confusion about what restrictions come with the revenue bonds.
I still don't understand. It's not a GO bond. It's a revenue bond, and the revenue bond was purchased through council and our procedures through the college, and that took a vote of the board to proceed on that. And that was approximately $10 million with all the pots.
No, the revenue bonds were $65 million. So we had to go out to the bond market, and we had to essentially pledge our tuition to pay down the bonds. So that's the collateral, if you will, used for the revenue bonds.
Okay, so I'm assuming that when the board voted to do that, there was a list of items that were going to be funded by that.
We had a proposed list of projects that we were envisioning, and we also had to take those projects up to Phoenix and present to the group up there the projects we were interested in moving forward at the institution.
And was one of the projects this?
I'd have to have either Dave or someone else come and talk more in terms of the particular items.
Hi. The expansion of downtown campus properties was specifically mentioned as part of the revenue bond project outline. The hotel properties as a specific project was after that point. So it was, we purchased some properties with revenue bonds. It was a combination. Some of the revenue bonds were used for that. Some college resources were used for that. Then the board approved, when we were talking about different projects that could be done with the hotel properties, there was budgeted money put aside. That's the $10 million. So sort of two different time frames, two different elements, a little bit of crossover between the two.
And that decision to put aside the $10 million was made by the board?
Correct.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Sanchez, I was wondering, can we get copies of SWAM's, those 4 reports on the bottom of slide 10?
Absolutely.
Just because I think it would be good for us to read what the experts said about those buildings and viable use, whatever they may have written in there. That's my first question. My second question is for Dr. B and everybody, but I asked in a meeting a week or two ago about on the last page of our last year's budget, there's a note and it says the statutory expenditure limitation is calculated by the Arizona Department of Revenue Economic Estimates Commission and applies to current and plant funds. And then in plant funds, it has parentheses, unexpended and retirement of indebtedness. So I'm assuming that entire retirement of indebtedness means paying off our loans. I could be wrong, but this really isn't in concerning the hotel properties since we've already bought them. But if some of the money we can spend on operations is going to paying off our loans, we might want to keep that in mind if we make more purchases with anything that we're going to have to repay, because if it is using up some of our abilities to spend money on teaching and learning, we might want to make sure we ponder that before we incur any more debt. But Dr. B, did you get anything with that for me?
Again, I haven't gotten your formal answer on that, but again, it's a technical technical note at the bottom of the thing, but I'll give you the quick and dirty of it, which is that retirement of indebtedness, long-term liabilities, certain capital expenses are outside of expenditure limitation. You put them all into the mix, and then you take things out that are excludable, essentially. I've got to go through technically the details of that to show you. Haven't had time to do that yet, still on my list, but that's the first question. The second one is related to these future projects. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of folks, but when we're looking at that financial summary and it goes future projects, when we're talking about the upcoming budget, we're talking about finishing up currently going projects. What the conversation is on a longer term, and I think that when we get into the June retreat, the retreat is strategizing how to approach some of these future needs, wants, desires, and then how to fund them. Because what will become, I think, fairly apparent is that when you're talking about a $30 million project here, a $40 million project there, deferred maintenance over all of there, you're talking about resources that are beyond the college's operating capability, and we're going to have to start talking about something like a GO bond and going out to the taxpayers and saying we have major needs. Here's our list of things. Here's what we'd like to do. Here diagrams of what they will look like. You know, we've got to strategize about that, but that's the May retreat conversation, is really talking about some of these longer term decisions and then how to fund them.
I just have more of a comment, I guess, for the greater audience, and that I've appreciated the emails that I've received regarding these properties and the conversations I've had with the folks that I've mentioned, and a number of them were asking me whether they could come and speak as part of this, and we weren't able to make that happen. But just a reminder to them or anybody else that's interested, you know, we do have a regular board meeting on, is it the 8th, 10th, May 8th? 10th, on May 10th, and so there's a public comment period there. So I know just my inbox would suggest that people are interested in commenting on this. So I would encourage people to use that time to share your thoughts. And I would be especially interested, as I talked before, about some of those community partners, because I don't know that I fully understand. I mean, this isn't an island, right? Like, I mean, whatever we decide cascades into other things that are going on in the, and I don't know that I fully understand like what dominoes will fall if we do what, in terms of the area or things that presupposed we were doing this or that with those properties, if we may or may not be able to do that. So anyway, anybody that can give me more information from the community or from those community partners, I appreciate it.
I also like to give a comment. I think it's when we were first approached, when I came in 19 and 20, I think my understanding, I know as was mentioned here before, it was not unanimous because we had questions, and I still have questions. One of the questions that I would say is that right now, if we saw here is the deferments. There is a immediate need for deferments. There were, for example, the plumbing, the HVAC, and the electrical. My question would be back to the deferments for the 29th Street. I know that property is TUSD, correct? And where is TUSD meeting with us in reference to those building?
We'll talk about it when we get to PSCSI, okay. But their position right now is it's up to us.
I just want to make a point that there's a lot of deferments that we're going to pass by, but I think some of those deferments should be a priority as well, too. As never forget the students in reference to the recruitment and retention and the low enrollment that we have, but I think those should be constant as well, too. Pima College should not be in the business in reference to renovations, but more importantly, it has to be in the business of really investing back with all students as well, too. And that's my comment. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, we're almost at the top of the hour. You had projected till 6:30. What is the board's pleasure?
Are we going to still hear about the next safety Yes.
So that's why I was asking. If
Yes.
it's your pleasure for us to go through this, and
Yes.
then it's just a question of, are folks willing to extend beyond the time for the remaining items?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Benny. All right, so now we're going to get, and again, we wanted to make sure you got a holistic view of what's kind of in the future here. And so I'll bring Amanda up, and then I'll take the first slide, and then I'll give the rest over to her. But the 29th Street, obviously, it's a leased facility from TUSD. It has an outdated HVAC system, and it requires maintenance. It continually fails. All right, so that's, again, what we're trying to point out here. We're looking at it in kind of two approaches. A $1.3 million Band-Aid approach to where it gets it up to a sustainable kind of operating function, or a brand new system, which is really updating to a two-pipe to a four-pipe system, making it less noisy, makes it more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. But again, we would be doing that to a leased facility that we would not get our money back into. So that's the dilemma, is do we put a whole lot of money into it, or just enough money that it keeps it running and then gives us time and space to then potentially move PSESI and out to East Campus, which is, again, in line with what the Facilities and Educational Master Plan was recommending anyway, right? So really, we're accelerating, and then we, along with that, and we'll get into it, is reimagining currently what we're doing at East Campus to ensure that PSESI fits, right, at least initially, before we make any other further discussions about, potential expansion in that remark. All right, TUSD's position on shared costs. All costs are absorbed by PCC. All right, that is their position. We've asked them. It's actually in our contract as well. And then there is an amortization, into our rent, but we only have 4 years left. Our rent's only 130, I think, right now. And so we would never get the 6.4 out back at all. And then we may get a good portion of the 1.3 back, right? Not all of it, but a good portion of it. And so that's kind of the reason why we're talking about it. And then so I'll let, and again, we're going to use this in your calculus to prioritize resources, to look what we should be doing now versus later, and how, again, we want to get your feelings on that, as well as, and again, Greg, Mr. Taylor, you've brought this up a couple times about how we do and reimagine, right, what we're doing at all our campuses, right? So this kind of goes and fits into that when we talk about a reimagination of what we do and how we do things on campuses, okay?
Tom, can I just a quick question? Sorry, I just want to make sure I understood. So when you say TUSD's position on shared costs, that's written into our lease, or that's just like
both.
their thoughts on how we should?
No, it's written into our lease.
Okay.
As well as that's their position, because, they could come back and say, hey, we'll share it 50-50 or 25, 75, but they weren't even going that way. So I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of understood that. Yeah.
Brief comment reference to TUSD. They also have new board members as well, too. It doesn't hurt to ask as well, too, in reference to doing the shared costs. Because it is their facility, and we want the best for all students and all people that are going to be residing in that, within the lease as well, too.
Yeah.
They have 3 board members.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, sorry. Okay, so the 29th Street, are we planning on selling that? Do
It's
you know?
not ours.
Oh, it's not ours.
That's what I'm saying. We're saying it's a leased facility.
We're leasing it.
Yes, from TUSD.
Okay,
That's why we're in this
I see.
situation we're in. If we're going to keep it,
Okay.
then that's something we wouldn't even probably even be here,
Okay.
right? But it's not ours.
I see.
Okay.
Okay.
Next, I'll have Dr. Duran-Cerda talk about, reimagining the campus. So we'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll go into some of the the options for PSESI.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Board Chair Real, Vice Chair McLean, members of the board, Chancellor Lambert, colleagues and guests. I'm here to provide a very high-level concept of possibilities of reimagining the East Campus, and I'm here to get your input as well. Before we define anything, it's important to get stakeholder input internally and externally. So with currently the East Campus has a wide array of offerings, and the most significant in-person enrollment that we're seeing is within the business area and also information technology, as well as gen ed areas in math, communications, and sciences. We also have very unique programs at the East Campus, and you can see in the slide there, for example, our CTE areas and the Early College Vail Partnership. So we have IT and Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, PSESI Center of Excellence, if that's where it's going to go, Veterinary Technology, and also Vail High School. We also have EMT, Administration of Justice, Makerspace at East Campus, the art sculptures at the campus. So these are also very unique to the East Campus. If we relocate PSESI to the East Campus, we need to make sure that part of the reimagining is that we align our course offerings and also student support services as well as academic supports to all of these unique programs. At the same time, it's important to maintain the HLC definition or designation of a campus, and this has a lot of benefits to us, for example, in receiving grants. One other purpose, we would need to redefine our course offerings and scheduling. And this is not just East Campus. As Board Member Taylor's talked about reimagining all campuses, so we want to take a good look at all of our campuses and fine-tune our scheduling. And that includes looking at pathways and also collaboration with the gen ed courses that would be offered at East Campus and at the other campuses. For example, we're working on completion tracks. Completion tracks means that students are taking all of their classes or programs within one campus instead of having to drive to various campuses. So like I said, that would be part of the reimagining of East Campus, but all campuses as well. That way students can plan ahead for their schedules, meaning class schedules, but also work schedules. And also one final thing I'll mention is space capacity. So right now with our current enrollment, there's about 33% of space that is not utilized that could help out if when PSESI moves there, that we don't have to disrupt any of the courses that are being offered. So that's in a nutshell of exploration of reimagining the East Campus. Are there any questions?
I have a question. Yes. So, you know, part of my feelings about reimagining the East Campus is I spent so many years there. Back in the day when we had very high enrollment, there were no free rooms. I mean, we went from 15 minutes in between classes to 5 minutes between classes because we just didn't have enough space. So I think I'm looking forward to moving PSESI to the East Campus, but I think that thinking that enrollment will always stay down, it's not my goal to have enrollment always stay at the level it is. And so I guess my first question is, are we having meetings with like the librarians and the people who schedule the community room just to make sure that the people who are actually there all the time, and no disrespect to you, I don't mean to say that you're not there a lot, but the people that are at the campus, working at the campus, they know better than any of us the room use and all of that, and what kind of just talking about collaboration again and shared governance and all of that, what kind of meetings have gone on at the East Campus to make sure that everybody has their input?
That's part of the planning process, so we would conduct those stakeholder input meetings. I believe the campus VP has held a meeting here and there just to get the word out about the exploration process. But for me, that's why I started out saying it's a high-level exploration concept. So part of the planning process would be to have meetings with the stakeholders, including if we're going to reduce the library and student services footprint, what does that mean? What does that look like? And faculty offices, et cetera.
You know, can I just tag on to this? The Vail Early Learning College, that might not be the exact name, but my guess is that they use the East Campus because we have a library, because we have a tutoring center, because we have all of those things. I know in one of the options, the ESI would take over all of the, I think it's E4, the science, E7, all the science labs. And, I'm pretty sure that Vail is not going to be happy if they're sending their juniors and seniors to the East Campus and we don't have, biology labs for them to take a biology class. So that's just one comment. And then the other thing, and this is not necessarily for you, Dr. Dolores Duran-Cerda. I'm not used to saying just the last name, sorry.
Think of Duran.
Okay. Yeah. So a long time ago, I asked for copies of the facility master plan, educational master plan, and I was told they're online, so I felt like, oh, that's embarrassing. But I read both of those, and there are a lot of things that I'm interested about the online versions, but I just wanted to mention that the online version and the print version are not the same. And I'm just wondering, when did it change? Why did it change? Who were the stakeholders who put the new verbiage down? And I mean, I'm not against any of it, but it's just interesting that the words used in the original facilities master plan, especially about the East Campus, is not identical to what is online. And there are some things about the online version that just, I'm not a statistician, but I took enough statistics classes when I was working on my PhD to know, well done methodologies for research and things like that. And I'm concerned about some of the things that are in the online version. So I'm not sure who that question comment is really going to, but it's out there for the world now. Okay. Thank you.
We'll take that on and look at it.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
And so just to, now I forget what I was going to say. So this is a domino effect, all right? So if you look at the needs at 29th Street, all right, and then you look at potentially how we need to do, we want to invest money wisely, right? And so it's, one of the options is to invest money wisely back into East Campus versus TUSD, right? So, but what we need though is time and space to do that, right? When I mean time and space is we need the next year to do, as Dr. Duran-Cerda just said, is engagement. Engage the campus community, the faculty, the staff, et cetera, the students. Engage the community, engage Vail, engage the people who we need to engage to then get their views and then come up to that happy medium, right? But what we're asking you for is kind of like permission to go forward with this concept, because if we didn't, then they'd come to you anyway, right? And so now we have the cover, in a sense, that we can engage and we can move forward in a deliberate fashion and do the analysis and then come up with a plan that we then will brief you later on how we do this, okay? So that's kind of conceptually, I wanted to make sure you understood.
Thank you. And one other thing I just want to share too, I hear oftentimes people are saying, well, enrollment's down at the East Campus, and yeah, but it's still the largest of the three smaller Desert Vista, Northwest, and the East Campus. It's still the largest of those three as far as students and classes and things like that. So I don't think we should discount, I don't think, when we talk about, reduction in potential gen ed course offerings, I'm I'm thinking we need to revisit that and make sure that's going to help the college be better and stronger, not already hurt declining enrollment even more. Just, that's my feeling. Thank you.
And again, we'll go through that analysis. It may not be, right? And if you bring PSCSI, I mean, they've got just as much enrollment in those programs as East Campus does, period, right? So in essence, what's going to happen is you're going to increase enrollment on East Campus by doing it this way,
Well,
right? Because PSCSI has programs, and Amanda will get into it, but scattered throughout the city, right? And if you co-locate, which again, what a center of excellence is, right? You bring in all those programs here, you're going to increase enrollment, right? It's just how we really gets down to, as Dr. Duran-Sutter said, the scheduling, right? Because there is a peak time at 9 in the morning where 27 or 28 classrooms are being used of the 42, and it tapers off the rest of the day. So it's just creative scheduling, in essence, that we're going to have to look at and analyze.
Completely agree. One other thought that just popped in my mind was when we closed campuses during summer school one time at the East Campus, it started a crazy downward spiral with enrollment. And I think that when we move PSESI to the East Campus, if we are taking away classes at the East Campus, that doesn't necessarily mean that those students are going to travel all the way across town to go to any of our other campuses. So I think we just need to be really careful. Instead of doing like we did when we closed the campus, we surveyed students, and that was a whole crazy thing too, as far as the methodology there too. But I think we need to ask students, in advance, hey, if we cancel these science classes, do you feel comfortable still taking some of your classes at the East Campus and then going across town to the, Stone downtown campus to take a class? I think we need to make sure that we're doing this knowing all the ramifications of moving PSESI to the East Campus and curtailing what is currently going on there. We don't want to hurt ourselves, that whole thing.
I'm assuming you want some kind of decision from us for direction in May at the meeting? If so, I would appreciate a recommendation from staff at that meeting.
All right, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much, Board
Thank you,
Chair
Joe.
Rial and board members, for allowing me to be here to talk about Public Safety Center of Excellence. If it's easier to say public safety instead of PSESI, please feel free to. PSESI can be a mouthful, a tongue twister. So you have greater detail in your executive summary, but public safety and first responder programs here at Pima Community College have a very long history. We really trained the majority of first responders in Southern Arizona. We have 5 programs. We have fire science, we have law enforcement, we have EMT, we have paramedic, and our administration of justice studies, which is part of the liberal arts transfer program as well. And so we are all over. So we serve many dual enrollment high schools. We serve many of our fire agencies here in town. And we have programs at East Campus currently, as well as 29th Street. And then we utilize the City of Tucson's Public Safety Academy on South Wilmont near I-10 for some of those large-scale things that we don't have capacity right now here to do at Pima Community College. Things like a burn tower and a driving range and firearms training. Those we utilize through an intergovernmental agreement. We utilize that Public Safety Academy down on Wilmont. We have numerous partnerships across town, numerous contracts, including our multi-million-dollar contract with the Air Force to train paramedics, and contracts with Pasquayaki Tribe to train EMTs, and to train EMTs with AMR, American Medical Rescue. So we, again, train the majority of first responders in Southern Arizona. So currently at 29th Street, we have primarily paramedic left there, which has experienced tremendous growth. So we're doing all of the paramedic training, we're doing refresher trainings, we're doing contract training. We're also serving our AMR EMT learners and our Pasquayaki EMT learners out of that that location as well. The HVAC challenges are significant every summer. We do have very sensitive, very high-tech equipment that is really sensitive to those temperature fluctuations as well. And it continues to be a problem. So really glad to be having this conversation about the approach. We also, in public safety, very much envision a move to East Campus that really serves that campus community, and it's certainly not our intent or desire to displace any courses or any programs there, and really see a vision of a beautiful campus that serves all of those CTE needs, as well as serves Vail and all of those gen ed needs, Board Chair, that you were talking about. Our first option that we have for you on here is really our option that is about no renovation. What could we move this summer without any renovation? And that, of course, goes back to the 29th Street HVAC needs and really looking at that question. So I worked with facilities and our East Campus Vice President, Edgar Soto, to look and see was there a viable option. And that is, you were referencing it earlier, Board Chair Rial, the E7 building, which is our science building. There are many things in the way that that's set up that make it readily available for paramedics to move into. It would not be enough room for everything that we do. We would need to utilize the community room as well. It does offer an opportunity for us to co-locate those programs quickly. However, there are many problems that don't have a solution. So we have a lot of equipment. We right now have about 4,000 square foot of storage for equipment. We would be short 2,500 square feet. In working with facilities, we have not been able to identify a viable option to put in place by summer to have that required equipment. It also lacks testing breakout room space and office spaces. It also presents us with significant logistical time frame challenges. We currently have programs in operation, programs for open enrollment, paramedic learners. Our military cohort is currently in place as well too. So it would significantly disrupt programs to have to pick up and move at this time. It would take all of the science labs and classrooms offline, and there are classes currently scheduled there for the summer. And then we also are an accredited paramedic program at 29th Street, so we do need to apply for that move with them as well. So that is what we were able to come up with as the best option to move, but as you can see, there are significant challenges and problems that prevent that move that we don't have viable answers to right now. So option number 2 on the second slide is then what it is that we were hearing about in reimagining that campus. And as Dr. Duran-Cerda indicated, that would take significant planning time with stakeholders to really identify what the best opportunities were to reimagine that campus. But our initial look with facilities and with the campus vice president was really identifying the very large library and student service center. It is a significantly sizable space, and looking at the north side of that and the community room gives enough square footage for the Public Safety Center of Excellence. Pros to that is we would be able to bring those programs together, and it will allow for enrollment growth. Just co-location, as we talked about before, on option 1 does not allow for any enrollment growth. Another benefit is it really makes use of that existing campus footprint without adding new buildings. And we heard from Dr. Duran-Cerda how the campus could be reimagined to serve learners. And that option of renovation does allow us that time to plan a move, to work with our accreditor, and to work with the timing of all of our programs to plan for that move. Challenges are, of course, funding source and disruption to the campus during the renovation. Option number 3 is new construction instead of renovation. So we had done previously work with the Schwame Architect Group to look at what our programming needs were for the Public Safety Center of Excellence, identify all of those different components and the square footage needed, and to look at the East Campus and what opportunities there would be for new construction. And so what we have here is a very preliminary possibility, and it is new construction to the tune of about 40,000 square feet. It does include, you see on the bottom of your drawing, on the bottom left-hand side, you see a brand new 2-story building that is off of the current EMT space, which is the E4 building. In that we would house paramedic program, we would have simulation space and a large virtual reality training lab. We have been doing virtual reality training in the paramedic program since during the middle of COVID, we implemented that. And as well as the fire science program, we have virtual reality training. So we want to expand that space as well. And then the blue space, the new construction on the top of your drawing, that's an additional 4,000 square foot storage building for paramedics. So the storage would be located close for all of our programs, but primarily the paramedic takes up the majority of that equipment. The cost for that we're estimating at $48.2 million. You heard for the facilities team about the large increases in costs that we've all have experienced. Pros to this plan of building new construction is, of course, co-location and a full center of excellence phase 1 with everything that we consider to be a phase 1 center of excellence. That includes that VR training space and simulation space. It includes things like a classroom that can be converted to a mock courtroom. It includes also, incredibly important, a planned resilience and wellness center. First responders have really horrible, tragic rates of suicide and illness, and taking care of our first responders that are in training, and all of our faculty and instructors who, the incredibly large majority, are working out in the field, taking care of them with spaces that they can take care of their mental and physical health is really important. So a full Center of Excellence phase 1 with new construction would include those very important spaces identified by our stakeholder groups as being essential parts of a Center of Excellence. It does allow for enrollment growth, and we have good parking lot adjacency. It would not require new parking lot being built. That location on that side of the campus, which is the west side of the campus, has significant parking there already. Cons with this, again, is it does increase the square footprint of the campus, and adding in kind of all of those expenses that go along with adding more square footage. It would require more space analysis to really ensure that this was the square footage that was needed in the proper plan. And then it would be a 2-story building on a campus that does not have a 2-story building at this point in time. And then, of course, there's the large price tag and needing a funding source for option 3. And so those are the 3 options that we have, and I certainly welcome any questions.
I have, it's just so I'm kind of understanding, like, option 1 could be a step to option 2 or 3, right? If I understand it, like they're not mutually exclusive.
Yep, correct. Option 1 would not be a center of excellence. It really would be a stopgap due to the 29th Street HVAC issue.
But really, that decision kind of predicates on whether or not we want to, how much we want to spend on 29th Street. That's why it's all intertwined, right? To do a Band-Aid approach, right? Really, what option 1 is showing you that it's not doable, right? That we literally, there's no engagement, right? There's no planning time. There's no really anything. So really, we're trying to show you there's option 1 because you may have asked that question, why can't we do it now? Well, for those reasons, we can't really do that now. So now the question is, do you want to spend 1.3 million or 6.4 to get 29th Street so we can have that time and space? So over the course of the next year, or two for that matter, but over the course of the next year for sure, we can do that engagement, we can do the planning, we can do kind of where things fit, where things don't fit, because these are just recommendations right now, right? Once we do the analysis, that will change, right? Because then we're more informed, we understand the environment a little bit better, right? Then we can make a more educated decision, and we can come back to you with that. Option two is probably a good recommendation, other than the price tag. Again, we have to find out, okay, what's in the art of the possible. So there's $5 million allocated right now for PSESI. We can take that $5 million and build upon it, potentially with funding, or do what we can with that $5 million, right? It's not optimal by any stretch, but again, it gets them on that campus after a year's worth of planning, and maybe over the course of the year we find additional funding, and that's fine. Obviously, phase three, option three, is where we kind of want to go, right? That's where Amanda says that is the optimal, and actually really there's phase two on top of that, but for additional money. But let's get the phase one first at the end of it, so then we understand kind of, and have this center that is probably a showcase around the state, right? Ma'am.
Okay. I guess my question is, we have a lot of extra space capacity throughout. My question is, I can understand trying to keep a center within an area, a specialty. But my question is, have you looked at other options in other buildings?
You mean campuses? Or
Campuses, yes.
Campuses, again, the proximity to Wilmot and the rest of the city where they're doing this kind of work, right, is paramount. Am I not mistaken, Ian? Right? Because all the first responders in the city and the county train just a couple miles from there. And so we want that proximity. Again, it could be Northwest Campus, but now you're talking about traveling an hour to get to those facilities, whereas now it's 10
Okay,
minutes.
so I can understand like that specific training or specialty being there, but there are other areas that you're going to be moving. Could we move those to another campus? I don't know. I'm asking.
Again, we're going to do the analysis, because I want to speak the truth, or not the truth that I know, until I do the analysis, right? That has to happen.
And I would also add that the proximity to the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base is really important to us as well. Prior even to our paramedic training contract, we've served the military for training for as long as we've been providing training. We are in our second 5-year contract with the military to do the paramedic training. It is a requirement that we have a proximity to the base. We have just now been asked for an additional 6-month extension on that contract. We expect for the RFI or RFP for the next 5-year contract to be out soon, and feel that we are very competitive. The Air Force is incredibly happy with us still as well. Our results are incredible, and we would like to be in a place that we are able to bid for that contract.
Well, the other thing that I recall is that we used to have classes on base before. Does that no longer happen?
There are some classes that we may hold on base. We have done EMT training on base. They don't have a need on base to have the full paramedic cohort themselves there. Interestingly enough, the fire department is a different address than our current Davis-Monthan training, which would also make it an additional HLC site. And so while we do provide some training on base, it is just not feasible to provide the full-scale paramedic training with that extensive equipment there.
So two questions. I thought I heard in one of my HLC trainings recently that when you're in monitoring or more serious situations, that they don't let you ask for those changes, like changing the programs from campus to campus. I might not be accurate about that, but I thought that when that vice president talked to us on that one slide where he had all the 5 different things, I thought that he had said that that was one of the problems with being in monitoring or worse. So that's the first thing. So we may be fixing the AC unit, is just heads up if that is accurate. And then the other thing is, I just think that it's really important that there's a word for it, cost benefit analysis or something like that. Option 2, the testing center, the library the tutoring center and the library will be gone for all of the other students at that campus if we use this. And I just think that we need to make sure that anyway, I don't know, Chancellor, if you could look into that about, getting the accreditation to change campuses. If we can't, this is a moot point. Let's work on getting the AC fixed, and let's move on to option 3 so we can build a bigger, better place.
So, Madam Chair, we will certainly check that out. I don't think we're currently restricted in our ability. It's when you get into a sanctions category where the restrictions really apply. But we'll confirm that. And let you know. That will influence what recommendation, obviously, we will bring forward in regards to the 29th Street piece, along with, we'll bring a separate recommendation on how to move forward on the hotel properties as well.
I think, now that I'm recalling it, I think it wasn't about moving a campus program. It was about we couldn't apply to get a bachelor's program if we were
That's correct.
in any.
Right. That would be more in line with, I think, what.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe, but let's just make sure, because if we can't do it anyway, we might as well just, do the quick repairs and then start planning for.
And I want to clarify something for Board Member Garcia. So put aside this particular piece, we do other types of education out at Davis-Monthan. So we do have that location. Yeah, it's more gen ed oriented.
And I would just add, while the map shows on option 2, the proposal to use that north side, that would be the library and the tutoring center, certainly no intention that those services would not still be needed at East Campus. It would be a reimagining of all of the other space for how to still have all of those services at the campus, but perhaps in different places or utilize space in a different way.
I mean, because students are asking for different ways of doing it as well. They want more virtual library. They want a more, really what they're looking for in the library, and Campus Vice President Soto has gone out there and actually asked them, right, kind of like an informal poll, that's just a study space for the most part, right? They'll need that. Okay, again, we can do the analysis over the course of the year, but library services are being reimagined all over the nation, and how they do that, and it's more virtual. But would there be still a space? Yeah.
Yeah. I was part of the team that did the tutoring center in the early 2000s. And I do remember that the East Campus had one of the highest rates of tutoring going on. And I doubt that's changed. One-on-one tutoring, I don't care what you're doing. It's way easier to learn if you can actually look somebody in the eye and understand what they're thinking than via an online, what's G-Chat bot or whatever it is.
But I think, to Board Member Garcia's point, I think there are some programs at East Campus that could potentially be relocated to some other places. We know our IT program has outgrown the space at East Campus. So we're going to have to re-examine whether we create another location in addition to that, or is this the perfect opportunity to really look at recentering IT, cybersecurity at another place in the district. So those are good options for us to consider.
Building on what Board Member Garcia said, I'm just, maybe not, like, I understand the need or the desire, at least on a permanent basis, for proximity to everything that you're talking about, but just for the sake of discussion, because if what you're trying to buy is time until this could be built, is there a theoretical interim plan that would relocate some of these programs temporarily from the 29th Street location to other Pima campuses, with the idea that it would eventually move all, whatever that timeline is, that would be feasible, where you just have to deal with the distance for a short period of time? I don't know the answer, but I'd be curious.
No, but we'll factor that into our calculus for how we move things. Obviously, it's not going to be one and done. It's going to have to be phased over time, and what makes sense from a phasing standpoint.
And we still have the adult ed side of the house there.
Yes.
And, you know, so that's still going to continue. And, but the more failing side of that facility is the PSESI side, right? And so by investing really anything, but investing that 1.3 into, that will help the other side as well, right? So those systems won't, well, they'll still be loud, but they won't be failing to the extent they have been, right? So that's, again, part of the calculus as well. But we need to, if we upgrade them, it'll, again, provide that time so we can do the analysis, so that we can go forward. And again, it may not be one of those three options. It may be a hybrid of that comes out at the end, which is fine too, right? But we just need to, again, that time and space to do the analysis.
An additional point of information, our paramedic students at 29th Street, it's not your typical student that's there for a couple of hours. They're there for 8 hours a day. Depending on which program they're in, they're there anywhere from 2 days to 5 days a week. Again, 8 hours a day. So it is not your typical college student that's just there for a couple of hours and moving on. So the issues that we have with HVAC are really exacerbated. They are moving around, they are doing labs, they're not just also sitting. So appreciate that consideration as well. Thank you.
So on this last decisions needed slide, I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead of you, Tom, but is, like, when do you need, like, in the next board meeting, do we need to decide all these things, or what's the timeline for that?
So I think our goal will be to bring you at the earliest a decision recommendation by the May board meeting, but I think the latest will be the June board meeting.
On all these?
On both of these pieces.
For sure, the PSESI probably needs to be decided sooner rather than later.
Yes.
As soon as opportunity, because that's obviously a significant amount. And then the hotel properties and the move, really it's the conception. I don't think we have to come up with a recommendation per se, other than let's go forward with the concept and come back with the analysis. And the hotel properties, that's whenever you guys want to decide, I would assume.
Right. I think what I'll have my team do on the hotel properties is come to you and say, this is what we're envisioning doing. I think we need to go out and talk to the community before we make any final decision on the property. And that will probably be the recommendation. And then on this other piece, we will come with some short-term, near-term plan, and then building out towards that longer horizon.
I would just hope that when you put the agenda together, we don't have all this stuff on there, because we're going to get bogged down in these decisions, and we really need to step back and look at these things. So if we need to proceed, but let's be careful.
And you had mentioned, I think, Chancellor, that maybe we could have a special session and only have, I mean, we might have a 40-minute call to the audience with people want to, spend 3 minutes telling us, what they know that we don't know. And if that could be our only item to vote on, I don't know if we want to do it right then or if we want to wait till another meeting, but I think it would be really good to give those people who are passionate about this to have an opportunity to talk to us. Emails are good, but nothing like hearing somebody talk. So can I move on to the 2 action items? Okay, can we have a motion. Did everybody get a chance? It's 2 intergovernmental agreements for literacy certification for teachers.
So moved.
Okay, and is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. And then the last item is debriefing with our governing board self-evaluation.
Madam Chair, just as a point of clarification, was that motion for both items?
Yes, it was. Yes, it
Okay,
was.
okay, just want to make sure that that's,
Yeah. Is that okay that we did them both together?
I think so.
Okay, yes. So discussion. Anybody have anything to say about our governing board? Was I correct that we had agreed a couple of months ago that we were going to have 2 different components, one where we were going to evaluate ourselves and one we were going to evaluate the board as a whole? So can we change what we have online to do that? Oh, it is?
She's talking about this board. These are individuals.
So I think the envision, because the way I read it, the way it looks right now, it sounds like I'm evaluating the whole board and then I'm evaluating Wade and Teresa and Luis and Maria and me. It was intended for, I only fill out me? Was that what it was intended for?
Bring it back. You want to do it or bring it back?
So are we good with, is there any more discussion on that? She shouldn't have changed it so you guys can evaluate Greg Taylor.
So Andrea's going to change it, send it to us, we do it at home?
Yeah.
Good.
You can't put nothing bad about it.
Okay, is there anything else? Okay, I'm going, oh,
Okay, that's all.
I know that I would like to put on the table in reference to what is it? In order to speak, you got to be 24 hours in advance? Or can it be a couple of hours in advance?
are you talking call to the audience?
Call to the audience, yes.
Call the audience, they have 2 ways of registering. They can do it online 24 hours in advance, or we have cards in the back of the room that they can fill out at the meeting before the meeting.
Okay, maybe that's the question that I have is why is it 24 hours in advance to be on?
It's, if they want to
If it's
register
online, yeah.
online, they have to register 24 hours in advance. If they're, yeah. Oh, I see what you mean, if somebody wanted to be on Zoom. I think it's just because of a bunch of people registered last minute. Andrea is going to be running around like crazy instead of just taking care of the normal business that she has to take care of, yeah. So I guess that's why it was, if you wanted to do a call to the audience and via Zoom online, we'd like them to register in advance.
And you got to remember, everybody else watches on YouTube. If you want to speak, you go to Zoom. So there's only so many accounts that then have to be created, and that special invite and all that. If you don't have one, yeah.
Well, each meeting can only have so many people in it. So if hundreds of people wanted to be online, it would be hard to navigate, if they're online and if they're ready to speak and all of that.
I guess what he's asking for, can we shorten the time?
Can we shorten the time, but also can we have the details on that? Because I've been asked and I want to share the information as well.
12 hours?
It's too long, 12 hours. Maybe 4 or 6 would be good.
It's really, part of the challenge is going to be staff availability. So let's say if you used a 12-hour window and the meeting starts at 5:30, they have to be here at 5:30 in the morning. And I just want to be sensitive to the impacts to our staff. But can we probably pull that off? Arguably. But I'd like to ask them before we commit to something.
Well, that's the thing that I think we should do a discussion on and dialogue on, to clarify.
Push our buttons.
Push our buttons when we're going to speak?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we'll think about that right now. We're going to keep it as is just because of logistics and not wanting to make Andrea have to be here at 5:30 in the morning. And yeah, and you know, here's the thing, just encourage people, you know, we come in person. We want to see you. We want to hear what you have to say. So if the 24-hour limit is not okay, either, you know, come see us in person or try to get it done by the 24-hour mark. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all in a couple weeks.